"Meet the family that will carry my name," Richard announced as he entered the private dining room with one arm around a young pregnant woman. Naomi's daughters immediately rose from their chairs, while Richard guided Jiwon to the seat opposite their mother and placed a deliberate hand against her stomach. "The son I should have had years ago." Naomi tightened her fingers around her glass, but Maya leaned toward her before she could answer. "Mom, please don't turn this into another scene." Elise quietly moved Naomi's wine out of reach, treating her as though humiliation had already made her unstable. Naomi looked past Richard toward Kang Min-jae, the silent fixer who had placed her on a plane 6 years earlier and removed her from Seoul. She leaned close enough for her breath to touch his jaw. "Kiss me before my daughters see that he replaced me." Min-jae's gaze lowered briefly to her mouth before he refused. Instead of walking away, he pulled out the chair beside Naomi, sat down, and took her hand across the white tablecloth. "Let them watch me choose you." Richard's hand slipped from Jiwon's waist, but he recovered quickly enough to laugh. "Before you admire his performance, girls, remember that this man belongs to me." "Stand up," Richard ordered. Yet Min-jae remained beside Naomi with her hand held beneath his. Richard snapped his fingers and reminded him that he was paid to remove problems, not become involved with them. Elise stared at their joined hands while Maya moved her chair farther away from her mother. Min-jae removed the earpiece from his ear and dropped it into Richard's wine, where it struck the glass with a clean metallic sound. He then unpinned his silver security badge and placed it beside Naomi's plate. "My contract ends tonight." Richard reached across the table, but Min-jae covered the badge with his palm. "You lost the right to command me when you turned your daughters into witnesses against their mother." Naomi withdrew her hand before he could tighten his fingers, making it clear that his public choice had not purchased access to her. Maya pointed toward him. "How much did she pay you?" "Nothing," Naomi answered. Elise studied the scars across Min-jae's knuckles before looking back at her father. "Then why does your fixer look ready to kill everyone in this room for her?" Richard retrieved the badge and slipped it into his pocket. "Ask him what he did on the night your mother abandoned you." Richard threw a psychiatric report onto the table and claimed Naomi had returned because she could not tolerate seeing another woman take her place. Elise opened the file while Maya read the printed descriptions of obsessive behavior, emotional instability, and a high risk of public escalation. When Naomi reached for the pages, Elise pulled them against her chest. "Did you stop taking your medication?" Rather than struggle for the file, Naomi removed the final sheet, pressed it flat against the table, and placed one finger beneath the date. "Read it carefully." "March 17th, Maya said. Naomi moved her finger toward the doctor's signature. "Dr. Mercer died in December." Min-jae lifted the page beneath the overhead light, revealing that the signature ink reflected differently from the older printed text. Richard tore the sheet from his hand, but Naomi kept her attention on her daughters. "He signed a dead woman's name because he expected you to fear me more than you questioned him." Richard pressed a concealed button beneath the table, and an old recording of Naomi appeared on the wall screen. "The doctor may be dead," he said, "but your confession still has a voice." On the screen, a younger Naomi sat inside a hotel room with her hands clasped tightly enough to whiten her knuckles. I am leaving because Elise and Maya are safer without me. Maya's chair scraped across the floor, while Elise covered her mouth and watched the recording without blinking. The video continued until Naomi stated that Richard had not forced her and that she was voluntarily surrendering her parental rights. Richard paused the image on the moment she signed. You called me a liar, yet your own mouth clears my name. Naomi faced her daughters without attempting to deny the recording. I said every word. Maya turned away, and Min-jae moved toward Naomi before she raised one hand to stop him from touching her. Beneath the table, Ji-won pushed a folded document against Naomi's shoe, while maintaining the pleasant expression Richard expected from her. Naomi opened the document beneath the tablecloth and found an amendment transferring Elise and Maya's inheritance to Richard's unborn child. 2 unsigned lines waited at the bottom. Ji-won kept smiling as her lips barely moved. He needs both signatures before midnight, and he will not let them leave without giving him what he wants. Richard placed 2 gold pens before Elise and Maya and presented the amendment as a fair arrangement for all his children. Naomi laid the document over her recorded confession, forcing the daughters to read the clause, redirecting their trust to the unborn baby. You're giving everything to him? Maya asked. Richard rested his hand against Ji-won's stomach. To your brother. You already have 2 daughters, Naomi said, and now I will finally have an heir. Naomi removed a red legal seal from her handbag, prompting Richard to lunge across the table before she could lower it. She reached the amendment first and stamped a single word across the signature section. Rejected. Richard seized the page and told her she possessed no authority. So Naomi turned the final sheet toward her daughters and showed them the title printed beneath her name. Sole controlling trustee. Richard's grip loosened while Min-jae looked from the seal to Naomi, understanding that she had not returned to Seoul to plead for recognition. Maya stared at her mother. You controlled our trust this entire time? Richard recovered by pulling an old parental waiver from inside his jacket. She controlled your money, but she still signed away both of you. Why did you sign us away? Maya demanded, while Naomi folded the waiver and refused to answer in front of Richard. Elise moved between her mother and the exit. You crossed the world to come here, so stop hiding behind another silence. Not while he controls the room. Richard smiled, as though her refusal confirmed every accusation he had made. She creates the wound, then punishes everyone who asks to see it. Min-jae rose from his chair and admitted that he had been present when Naomi signed the document. She turned sharply toward him. Sit down. I can tell them what Richard did. No, because that truth belongs to me. Although Min-jae remained standing, he obeyed her command and closed his mouth. Naomi gathered the trust amendment and crossed to the double doors. But when she pulled the handles, steel bolts slid into place and a red lock illuminated above her. Min-jae instinctively reached for the badge he had already surrendered. Richard poured himself another drink. You may control their money, Naomi, but I still decide who leaves this hotel. Min-jae forced open the service elevator and took Naomi by the elbow, insisting that she leave before Richard brought the police and Han security upstairs. She pulled away and refused to cross an ocean only to escape through a kitchen. You are treating survival like wounded pride, he said. And you are disguising another order as protection. Min-jae stepped into the elevator and held the doors while Naomi entered, pressed the lobby button, and immediately canceled it. When he reached past her for the controls, his chest brushed her shoulder and his hand stopped beside her cheek. Naomi turned her face toward his fingers. You had 6 years to touch me. He lowered his hand without making contact. I had 6 years to remember that wanting you never gave me the right. Naomi removed a thin black ledger from beneath her jacket and opened it to pages containing Richard's hidden transfers, security bribes, and withdrawals from the daughter's trust. At midnight, copies reach every Han elder who still considers Richard useful. Min-jae closed the ledger and pressed it firmly against her chest. They will cut your throat before the clock reaches 11:59. Richard opened the ballroom doors and dragged the family conflict in front of 30 waiting cameras. He led Ji-won and his daughters onto the engagement platform, then took the microphone and announced that his former wife was struggling with the evening's news. Camera flashes struck Naomi's face while Min-jae stepped in front of her, attempting to shield her from the press. She moved around him rather than accept protection that also made her disappear. Richard drew Elise and Maya close and told the guests that his daughters understood the need for healthy boundaries. Naomi raised the black ledger above the press barrier, but a guard seized her wrist before she could reach the stage. Min-jae removed the guard's hand and then closed his own fingers around Naomi's arm. Not here. She looked down at his grip until he released her. Maya took the microphone from her father. If you did not abandon us, then say it where everyone can hear. Naomi stepped toward the platform, but the main screen behind Richard flickered and displayed security footage of her shoving pregnant Ji-won into a wall. Richard turned toward the cameras. Now everyone can see what my replacement awakened in her. The ballroom erupted as the footage showed Ji-won striking the wall and clutching her stomach. Elise ran from the stage and placed herself between the pregnant woman and her mother. Do not come any closer. Naomi stopped several feet away while Richard's lawyer took the microphone and described the incident as an attack by a rejected former wife. Reporters crowded the barrier, demanding to know why Naomi had targeted a pregnant woman. Instead of defending herself, Naomi pointed toward the screen. Play the 5 seconds before she fell. The lawyer insisted that the recording was complete, so Naomi moved toward the control booth until security closed around her. Elise tore the ledger from her mother's hand and threw it onto the floor. You came here to destroy him, not protect us. Pages scattered beneath the camera flashes, and Ji-won bent to retrieve one before Richard's guards could collect them. Naomi crouched beside her and asked what had happened before the shove. Ji-won tightened her fingers around Naomi's wrist. Richard pushed me into you because he needed your daughters to watch you attack his baby. Ji-won locked the powder room door while Min-jae wedged a chair beneath the handle. She removed Richard's engagement ring, dropped it beside the sink, and explained that he wanted neither a wife nor a family. He wanted the Han name and a male beneficiary. From beneath her dress, she produced the original trust amendment, whose final clause stripped Elise and Maya of every remaining asset. Naomi photographed the pages while Min-jae noticed the dark bruises hidden beneath Ji-won's bracelet. You testify And Richard does not leave this hotel standing, he said. Ji-won moved farther away from him. Does that mean prison? Or does it mean a body? Min-jae's silence answered before Naomi placed her hand over the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. No bodies. His gaze lowered toward her fingers, resting against his chest. You still believe you can control what I do? No, but I believe you came close enough because you wanted me to stop you. His phone buzzed before he could respond, displaying a police bulletin that named Naomi as a suspect in the assault of a pregnant woman. The powder room handle began turning while Richard's voice filled the hotel speakers. Bring my former wife to me before the police find her first. Min-jae pushed Naomi into a secure hotel suite, but she turned and struck the door before he could close it. Open this before you become another man who imprisons me for my own good. I will open it after I erase the warrant. He entered a code that turned the lock red, then blocked the control panel with his body when she tried to reach it. Richard cannot get to you here, neither can my daughters. Naomi pushed against his chest, and Min-jae caught her wrist before they stopped inches apart. His free hand rose toward her cheek, but when she looked at his fingers, he froze without touching her. She pulled her wrist from his grasp. You always arrive with a locked door and expect me to call it safety. A guard shouted his name from the hallway, forcing Min-jae to step outside while Naomi moved toward the opening. He shut the door before she reached it, and the external lock clicked into place. You can hate me after you survive. Before Naomi could answer, the wall screen behind her turned on and showed Richard standing between both daughters. Richard played the old recording until the younger Naomi signed the parental waiver and promised never to contact her daughters again. Maya pressed both hands against the glass wall of the safe suite, while Naomi approached from the other side and placed her palm against the same spot. Richard held up the original waiver and told the daughters that their mother had chosen freedom. Naomi activated the intercom. I said every word because he gave me no safe word to say. Maya stepped backward, but Naomi kept her hand against the glass. Ask him what he promised would happen outside your school if I refused. Richard immediately cut the intercom. Elise turned toward him. What happened outside our school? He folded the waiver and slipped it into his jacket. But before he could answer, Min-jae entered, carrying a silver drive. Naomi struck the glass and mouthed a warning, yet Richard still held out his hand. The original evidence in exchange for the key to her door. He pointed toward the locked suite. Choose whether she keeps her proof or keeps breathing. Min-jae placed the silver drive in Richard's palm, despite Naomi striking the glass again. Richard entered the release code, and when the safe room door opened, Naomi stepped into the hallway just as he dropped the drive onto the floor. His shoe came down hard enough to crack the casing and crush the only copy of the evidence. Naomi stopped beside the broken pieces. That was everything we had. Min-jae faced her. It was the only way to open the door. You traded my case for control over my body. I traded evidence for your life. When he reached for her arm, Naomi moved beyond his fingers before he could touch her. Richard brushed the fragments aside with his shoe. Now, she has nothing except the man who betrayed her twice. Naomi looked at Min-jae while his hand remained suspended between them. No, because now I know Richard still trained you better than I ever trusted you. The elevator doors opened behind her, revealing a detective holding an evidence bag containing a blinking black tracking device. The detective lifted Naomi's necklace beneath the hallway light and showed everyone the tracker hidden inside the clasp. Naomi looked at Min-jae, who made no attempt to deny that he had placed it there. "When did you do this?" "At the airport." "You fastened it around my neck yourself." "I needed to know where Richard took you." "You needed to know that you could reach me whenever you decided I was in danger." Naomi removed the necklace completely and placed it into his open palm. It was the same piece he had given her 6 years earlier, before escorting her onto the plane that separated her from her daughters. Elise stared at the blinking device. "You watched her from the moment she returned?" Min-jae closed his fingers around the necklace as the detective reached for Naomi's wrist. He stepped forward, but Naomi deliberately moved away from him and left a clear space between their bodies. She held out her hands to the detective. "Do not make one more decision for me." The first handcuff closed around her wrist, yet Min-jae moved again. Min-jae blocked the detective and offered himself in Naomi's place, admitting that he had moved her through restricted areas and accessed the hotel's private cameras. Naomi walked around him and presented her second wrist, but when he caught her hand, she tore it from his grasp. "You lost the right to touch me when you locked me inside that room." His fingers opened, but she continued before he could defend himself. "You lost the right to protect me when you traded away my proof, and you lost the right to explain yourself when you tracked me without asking." Min-jae stepped closer and told her to stay. But Naomi moved backward until the detective stood between them. "You do not get to order me anymore." The second cuff closed, and she entered the elevator without looking back. Min-jae remained beneath the flashing security lights, unable to follow or command the doors to reopen. His phone buzzed with a message from Ji-won, announcing that Richard had moved the trust signing to midnight. A second message contained an audio file, and Richard's recorded voice filled the hallway. "If Naomi talks, arrange an accident outside the girls' school." Min-jae played Richard's recording for Elise and Maya inside the empty bridal room. "If Naomi refuses to make the confession, make both daughters disappear." Maya dropped the psychiatric report while Elise gripped the back of a chair. The audio continued with a younger Min-jae asking what should happen if Naomi agreed to sign. Richard's answer came clearly through the phone. "Put her on a plane and tell her that the girls are safer without her." Min-jae removed his gun and placed it on the floor. "I escorted her out." Maya crossed the room and slapped him hard enough to turn his face, but he made no attempt to defend himself. "You helped him take our mother." "I believed she had accepted his money, and I chose the order because questioning him would have cost me my position." Elise replayed the threat and stared at the signature on the old waiver. She believed he would kill us. The hotel speakers announced that the midnight signing would begin in 10 minutes. Elise picked up one of Richard's gold pens while Maya opened the bridal room door. When Min-jae admitted that Naomi remained at the police station, Elise snapped the pen in half. "Then you follow our plan, and this time you do not control the exits." Richard placed fresh gold pens before his daughters while the hotel's wedding cameras streamed the midnight signing live. "Sign this, and our family begins again." Elise lifted one pen, waited until Richard smiled, and then broke it across the table. Maya swept the amendment onto the floor, prompting Richard to seize her wrist. The ballroom doors opened before he could force her back into her chair. Min-jae entered without guards, a weapon or the security badge that had once given him authority over everyone in the room. He placed his phone beside the wedding rings, and Richard's threat against the daughters filled the ballroom speakers. Guests who had been filming the celebration turned their cameras toward Richard. Ji-won removed her engagement ring and placed the original trust amendment beside Min-jae's phone. He intended to steal their inheritance before our vows. Richard reached for both pieces of evidence, but Elise drove the signing table into his path. When Richard shouted that Min-jae possessed no authority there, Min-jae faced the cameras. "I came to surrender mine." The doors opened once more, and Naomi entered carrying the black ledger. Richard looked at Min-jae and smiled. "Ask your mother what she paid him to do when she refused to leave Seoul." Richard threw an old airport photograph onto the signing table and demanded that Min-jae explain why Naomi had ever trusted him. Naomi stopped beside her daughters, while Min-jae remained where he was, refusing to use her return as permission to approach. "He did not rescue her," Richard said. "I ordered him to remove her." Maya looked at Min-jae. "What does remove mean?" Min-jae faced both daughters and every camera inside the ballroom. "I was ordered to kill her if she refused to board the plane." Elise immediately moved closer to Naomi, but Richard laughed and claimed that Naomi had still paid Min-jae afterward. Naomi opened the ledger to the final transfer and showed that every dollar from her divorce settlement had funded private security outside her daughter's schools. "I paid to keep both of you alive." Maya's knees struck the chair behind her as Naomi took her daughter's hands. "I did not leave because I stopped loving you." Richard reached beneath the signing table, but Min-jae saw the movement before anyone else. A gun appeared in Richard's hand, and he aimed it at Elise and Maya. "Sign the amendment, or decide which daughter I erase first." Richard pulled the trigger, but Naomi drove the signing table into his arm and sent the bullet into the ceiling. Maya pulled Ji-won behind the platform, while Elise kicked the fallen gun across the floor. Min-jae reached it first and aimed at Richard, who spread his arms and invited him to prove that he remained nothing more than a weapon. Min-jae's finger tightened against the trigger until Naomi stepped between them. No more men deciding which body pays. He lowered the gun, but Richard lunged toward the ledger before Naomi struck him across the face with it. Police flooded the ballroom and forced Richard to his knees in front of the wedding cameras he had intended to use for his triumph. Min-jae handed over the gun, his phone, and then his own wrists. "I concealed evidence, accessed illegal accounts, and obeyed orders that destroyed her family." The cuffs closed around him as Naomi walked in his direction. He did not ask her to remain or use his confession as a claim on her forgiveness. She passed him, joined her daughters, and left the ballroom holding both their hands. The police van door closed between Min-jae and the woman he was no longer permitted to follow. Min-jae arrived at Naomi's apartment without guards, money, a driver, or the suit jacket that once announced his status. Maya opened the door, but kept the security chain attached, while Elise stood behind her and watched his empty hands. When Naomi approached, Min-jae placed the old necklace on the floor outside the apartment. The tracker had been removed, leaving only the gift he should have given her without turning it into a leash. I came to return what I had no right to use. Naomi did not open the chain. What are you asking for? One chance to speak without giving an order. Elise watched him remain outside the threshold, while Maya quietly observed that he appeared afraid Naomi would close the door. Naomi kept her eyes on him. You will bring no guards, no money, and no protection I did not request. You will not touch me unless I ask, and if I tell you to leave, you will leave without argument. Min-jae's jaw tightened, but he accepted every condition. Naomi opened the door only far enough to retrieve the necklace. Tomorrow, you get 1 coffee, and my daughters choose the table. He nodded, without attempting to step closer. Naomi began closing the door, then stopped before the latch caught. And bring me the file Richard ordered you to burn on the night you put me on that plane. The remaining color left Min-jae's face. Naomi closed the door before he could ask how she knew the file still existed.